Thank you for attending our session today. It's De-Tabooing Disposals in Regional Museums. It's a John Ellerman Foundation funded project, and it's been run in conjunction with our partners, Cumbrian Museum Consortium partners, Lakeland Arts. So what is the project and why is it needed? It is a project focusing on the rationalisation and de-accessioning of the social history and costume collections here at Tullie. We have a lot of objects, and this probably a sentiment shared by a lot of museums, that we would not accession today. We've also got objects that have ended up in the collection that were just, for example, vacuums that were used in the museum and someone decided to accession. We wouldn't use to do that practice today, but we're stuck with the problems at the minute. And without disposals, collections will become stagnant if we do not have the space to continue collecting, as storage space is becoming an ever-growing concern. Here's some examples of the collections crisis. So the majority of museum collections are in status or decay, partly because perhaps we're not, for example, here we have some collections where we're not, we don't have this, we have so many objects that we're not adequately able to store the collections in their entirety. So disposals is the way of trying to free up the space and make our collections care much more efficient and appropriate for the collections we care for. 94% of museums stores were full in 2012, and I can only imagine that has gone even to a greater extent as time has gone on. And an estimated 10 to 15% of museum objects in storage don't belong there. So just to give a brief overview of disposals. Disposing an object means that the object permanently leaves the museum's collection. So objects can be disposed via a number of different methods. Transferred to another accredited museum, which if you did follow disposals, a couple of years ago, you could only dispose of objects to other museums. But now it's we're open to more options, so you can return to the donor. This is normally within a suitable time frame. Here at Tullie, it's 10 years. If we've had an object for less than 10 years, we can try to return it to a donor. Creative reuse, where an object gets a new life in a creative setting. Transfer to another public institution, such as a university, and an object can even be sold or destroyed. But it is important that the disposal process must be only carried out when it benefits the entirety of the collection. So, for example, if you were selling an object, that any money generated would have to go back into the collection in some way, either by purchasing perhaps new racking or purchasing new objects that you feel are more relevant to your collection. So how can disposals benefit a museum's collection? There are many benefits to disposing of objects in poor condition or that don't fit within your collection development policy. And as I've mentioned previously, it can create more space for relevant collecting, as well as allowing you to properly care for the objects you want to maintain in your collection. Current storage can be improved, and can protect objects from harm from objects that are deteriorating in their surrounding area, such as off-gassing from plastics. So a key first step for any museum that's going to start disposing is to have a clear collections development policy. It's a necessary step, as it establishes what objects you as a museum view are necessary for you to continue to tell the stories you want to tell. For us here, it's stories that tell the history and lives of people in Carlisle. But from that, you can also establish what objects should not be in your museum, and so should be disposed of. So how we have gone around disposing of objects is as my colleagues have created this rubric for our social history and costume collections, where we assess an object based on significant public engagement, potential, condition, object care and documentation/ownership. And within these sections, we score them based on out of 4, 1 being poor, 4 being high, good, excellent. So, for example, in significance, an object that would be marked as a 4 would be within the collecting area of national importance, integral to Tullie and the stories it tells, and aligns with contemporary collecting policy. And in poor significance would be outside the collecting area, not relevant to Tullie or local area, no interpretive capacity, and no alignment into contemporary collecting policy. So the disposal process here at Tullie is that once an object has been considered as a candidate for disposal, it must pass through 3 panels before it can be disposed. The first of these panels is the collections development panel, which is comprised of myself and other members of the curatorial team, as well as members of staff from our learning department and marketing departments. Objects are assessed and at any stage, I should mention, at any stage of this disposal process, objects can be sent back to me if more information is needed, or if we want to if we decide through the panels that we want to retain these objects. So after the collections development panel, it passes on to our senior leadership team, and then finally goes to the Cumberland Council, as they are the overall authority of Tullie, as that we are a council-run museum, and so all the collections are owned by the Cumberland Council. So disposing of objects, we've looked at it as when it comes to disposing of objects, trying to reduce as much waste as possible. So with objects that are in poor condition, we're trying to come up with other ways to dispose of an object rather than just throwing it away. So it's important to sorry. But as well, a key part of any sort of disposal project, even if you don't feel or have the capacity to do a mass disposal project such as we have done, a key step could just be refusing objects when they come to your collections development panels, and knowing what objects don't fit in with your collections and refusing those objects. So you limit how much you're collecting and only collect appropriate objects and relevant objects. So as I mentioned earlier, we have objects here at Tullie. No, I haven't mentioned earlier, sorry. Here at Tullie, we've disposed of objects based on 3 categories. Duplicate objects, objects that are in poor condition, and objects that no longer fit within the collecting geographical area. So to just give you an example of some of our duplicate objects, we have the table that you can see where we have multiple examples of different types of objects. So 16 vacuum cleaners and Eubanks, 13 typewriters, 8 bicycles, and these are all objects that take up valuable space and each individual no longer has a interpretive value for the museum, and so we're not able to use it to promote stories of Carlisle. And through disposing, so far we've disposed of, I think 223 objects have made it through to SLT level panel for disposal, and we've had a number of objects go to other museums. Some of our costume items go to a garment repair group in Carlisle, Tullie Textile. A large amount of social history objects did not leave the building but did leave the collection and joined the learning department's collection, and a number of objects will be soon hopefully leaving to join a local theatre group and have their moment on stage. So what we have learned from this project: disposals sound negative but can promote positive relations with many different types of organisations. And these are organisations that you normally would not interact with much as a museum, such as a theatre group and yeah, it's as I said before, it's important to have a clear collection development policy, and it is key for rationalising any objects you want to dispose of. As I said before, it's crucial that this is your first step when going about disposals. Creative disposal should be a crucial part of collections care, so collections can always evolve and remain relevant. And so through this project, we had a session with Dr. Jenny Durrant, who is a disposals expert, and she used the analogy of that collections should be like breathing in and out. So when an object comes into the collection, an object at the same time should leave the collection. So it's a continual process, and that you always have space for new objects, and your collections can always evolve. Creative reuse is a great way to reduce waste produced through disposals. We found this to be so far our best route for disposals, as material is always needed by local artistic and community groups, and through we still retain a public benefit with these collections, but but they get a new life. And a key thing I would say is that collections can take a lot longer than you would like. For example, here at Tullie, this was a 2-year project that started with my predecessor, Claire Dean. And when she left, we had one batch of objects that was confirmed for disposals. And when I started a year after she left, we just finally received approval for 4 more batches to go through to be disposed of. So what we would have liked to have done originally is push for the to have more autonomy when making those decisions under a certain valuation of objects. So certain lower valued objects would not need to go up to council council level of approval, partly because for us it's a big project, but for the council it's quite a small project, and so it's not a priority for them. So it gets lost with all the many things the council has to be concerned about, and because this doesn't actively improve people's lives in the community, so it's not as crucial for them, but it is crucial for us to continue as an institution. So thank you for listening. I realise that was very brief. If you have any questions about the project or about disposals in general, please get in touch with me, and that is my email address. Great.
Thank you, Lewis. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there in terms of obviously the experience that you had at Tullie House. I can see in the chat that your collection policy has already been highlighted, and obviously kind of colleagues keen to understand that. It sounds like that's the real building block of the process, really, isn't it? So that you know what you want to collect, and therefore you can easily identify what maybe doesn't fit quite so neatly.
Yeah.
There's a question here. I don't know whether whoever's behind the Merle tag today wanted to come on and ask that.
Yeah. Sorry, give me a second.
Right.
Hi, I was going to ask how you prioritize where you were going to start the project. Was it like by sort of type of object, or was it by like storage area?
So we started, we chose the costume and social history collections because they were, we had a lot of duplicate objects in the collection at a certain time past curators were just collecting mass objects, and now we don't use them to what extent they did, because we tell different stories now than they used to, so they're no longer relevant to our collection. But and so Claire Dean, when she first started, our key thing for those initial steps were to do some of the bigger, bulkier objects, because they did take up a lot of area, and because we have I think we have something like 8 fridges, which take up a sizable space in our storage areas, and no one needs 8 fridges. So they don't tell. We don't have a strong enough narrative link to be able to use them to tell stories, and so we have very limited use for them. So those were some of the key things we decided on early on.
You?
I think we can hear you, Carrie, if you're.
Oh, right. Sorry, you
You're
completely froze. I
Oh.
didn't hear you. So yeah, Lewis, thank you very much for that, and for sharing. That looked really inspirational, and I feel your pain with so much of the things that are in the collection. So thank you for the presentation. I was wondering how many objects do you batch together for a disposal to go up through the different strata of authority up to the council?
So it's not, we've not followed a strict numbering system for.
A woman named Sal Child.
I beg your pardon.
So yeah, we've not followed a strict numbering. So we don't have a set number of objects per batch. I'm not sure how Claire did it, but I've tended to try to do one batch, get and see how many objects I have by the collections development panel, and see if we have enough objects for it to be able to be sort of worth going over for the SLT and council level. Because as well, we realize that time is valuable to everyone, so we don't want to keep sending them small batches when we could just wait a bit and make a big batch and send it all at once. But as well, we don't want to send too big of a batch, so objects don't get the proper appreciation. So yeah, it sort of depends on how you feel, how your batch looks to you, really, and there's not really a set way of doing things. It's sort of how you feel about it.
Liz, can I come back at that? Did you find that, I mean, this might predate your involvement, but do you think that there was a need for those panels to come on board with sort of the idea of deaccessioning, or is this a new thing for Tullie House, I guess I'm asking, or is this something that has been going maybe in a less concerted method, sort of, I wondered how much you needed to talk to your panels about the process, about things to consider?
Well, a key so disposals, we've disposed of objects in the past here at Tullie, not to any sort of, not a mass disposal like we're doing now, but a number of years ago we disposed of some of our plastics from the costume collection, and they went to a university in Scotland where they were working on conserving plastics in heritage. But I think for us, it was a key thing to be able to get away sort of from the valuation of the objects and just try to get across to, particularly at council level, where objects, we're not doing this as a monetary practice, we're doing it to the benefit to the collection. And so I think that was the big thing we had to get across at first, that it's beyond money, there's tangible benefits that we will have, and also money benefits that we will have through the disposal process, as we're able to ensure that any money we spend on the collections now, we can be certain that it's on objects we want to maintain and keep for future generations, rather than objects that we know are no longer relevant to us.
Yeah, and I guess that matrices makes that kind of really clear in terms of where you're scaling or grading each object against different criteria. Did you have a kind of cutoff point? I think that, you know, you had a certain, I guess if they scored the highest number in everything, it was sort of 20 or 24 or something. Was there a cutoff point against which you tended to consider them more for disposal?
Well, we've had a number. So we've, in the collection, we have a number of objects. The one that comes to mind, we have that are going in the disposal process. We have ancient Egyptian textiles collected by Flinders Petrie. So by themselves, quite a significant object, but they have low relevance to Tullie, low relevance to Carlisle. And so even though there are significant objects and important objects, we feel that they would be better, they would get more accessibility and better used in the public setting at another institution. So even though it is not, and they're in great condition, and we have great documentation, and they're well stored, but even though they score highly, and we still feel it's because it has such a weak link to Carlisle and to stories we want to tell, that we feel it's more appropriate for them to be rehomed elsewhere.
Have any queries or questions to ask, or indeed sort of their own experience of deaccessioning and the challenges or opportunities that they faced?
I still have a massive amount of, I mean, rationally, I know that this is the way to go, and we really have to do this. But I still feel quite a knot of anxiety in my stomach about it, that I'm making the wrong decisions and that history will judge me badly for some of the deaccessioning that I've done. So I don't know whether you have any advice for a nervous deaccessioner.
I think everyone shares those, because it goes against sort of our own museum practice to sort of get rid of collections. We work to preserve collections for future generations, and so but it's at the same time it's difficult to work out to determine what future generations will value. For example, in the past, the mass collecting, they weren't doing it because they wanted, or they felt they wanted to cause us a problem in the future. It was because for them it was relevant, and it was relevant to the stories they wanted to tell. So I think a key thing is just to be confident that you're, at this moment in time, you're doing it for the right reasons. You're disposing of an object for the right reasons, and you appreciate each object as an individual, and you give each object time to be assessed, and then by the end of it, you can be almost certain that you've done it to the best standard you could have done at the time. So yeah, I'd say that would be my key thing. Just own up, be confident enough to say you've done it to your best of your ability at this moment in time.
Thank you. That's very wise advice.
Have you got a project in mind, Carrie, or is this on the longer to-do list of?
It's on the slightly longer to-do list, but it desperately needs doing.
Yeah.
I will also say that we've been quite fortunate to get this money from the John Ellerman Foundation to do our mass disposal project. So, but it's if museums are forced to wait on this sort of funding bodies to emerge, it's difficult to sort of find motivation and the time to be able to, the capacity to be able to carry out disposal. But I think a key thing is, like, it doesn't need to be mass disposals. If you just do like an object every month or so. You're doing a sort of a gradual. You can start to build it, embed the practice within your own museum, and as time will go on, it will get easier and smoother, and you'll feel objects will leave a lot more efficiently.
About kind of not underestimating how much time that can take. So yes, starting small is maybe the best advice, or if you can access additional support, so such as your project. Is it just yourself that's working on that project, Lewis, or is there others? I mean, obviously there's probably other colleagues that you're working with across the museum, but
yeah. So whilst I do sort of the day-to-day stuff, I do a lot of the objects and how we make decisions based on objects is based largely on the expertise of my colleagues in the curatorial department. So they bring a lot of their knowledge to they point me in the right directions in their collections for where they feel objects are no longer relevant. And so yeah, it's whilst I do the day-to-day, I get a huge amount of help from all my colleagues, and it's sort of a group effort to try and get objects to leave, because they also do recommend in the collections development panels, both at all three levels of the panels for disposal. People do suggest organizations where this will be more appropriate, so they do half my work for me in those instances.
I guess that also means that maybe carries concerns. It's not just one person feeling that they're making that decision, that it is that team experience, team expertise being brought together to make the right choice.
Definitely.
And have you got items that have gone into other museums? I noticed there's sort of a suggestion in the chat for the Egypt Centre, who might be kind of key one for your Egyptian collections, but for some of your social history collections, are they items you've managed to find other museums for? Because I'm very conscious that on the Royal Museums Network, we often get long lists of objects that are sort of offered up across museums, and I'm never sure if they make it into another collection or not.
Yes, you'll probably get that long list from me in a couple of weeks.
We'll look out for it.
So far, we've tried to do a targeted approach to disposal. So we've been approaching different organizations to see whether they are interested in certain objects. So we've most recently, for a museum, we sent it across the road from Tullie to the Cumbria Museum of Military Life. So that was our most recent museum transfer. But a large amount of our objects have been disposed of via either going to the learning department to become part of their collection, or through creative reuse. We found that to be our most effective method of disposal.
Have your visitors kind of been brought along this journey with you? Is it something you've talked to them about?
We've tried to make the process as transparent as possible, really. So when Claire Dean started, she did a number of blog posts about letting people know about the disposal project, the disposal process, what objects are being targeted. And through that, we did get a number of inquiries of people concerned about objects that were important to them or had some relevance to them. For example, not to keep talking about Egypt, but we had a local Egyptology society who have a burial shroud image that's in our collection, and they use the image of the burial shroud as their sort of banner for their society. So they were concerned if that object would go through the disposal project. And whilst it didn't go at the time, it is undergoing the process now. So I will be in touch with them just to keep them aware of what that this object is going to be may be disposed of, or at least going through the process, and just to keep them aware. And also we can work with them because they may be able to suggest a good place for it to be rehomed to.
That's so important, kind of keeping people informed. And if you've got kind of donors who might be worried that the item they've donated or similar, I remember very, very many years ago, probably at least 15, possibly longer years ago, rationalising deaccessioning project at Grasson Hall Museum in Norfolk, and I think our local press liked the sort of sensationalist headline of kind of, you know, the fact that we were emptying all of our stores, there was going to be nothing left of this, that, and the other, and obviously it wasn't by any stretch of the imaginations a large scale project, but I think that kind of then set hairs running, and we you know, we had to be on the front foot to ensure that we were sending out the right messages, and as you've explained so ably today, those sort of the positive benefits that can come about from actually finding out what's in your collection as well, because you can't dispose of it unless you actually know what it is.
Yeah,
So, you know, kind of doing that more research to identify the items in question.
I think that thing you've just touched on about media attention is a big thing of why other museums are reluctant to go through disposals, because bad publicity is very detrimental to a museum, because we work to the benefit of the public. So if we're not seen to be doing that in the media eye, it's quite a sort of blow. But I think like I say, we've just got to make it clear that we're doing, that objects are fully considered, and make clear why we're doing this and how the disposal process can benefit the collections that remain.
Absolutely. Well, that seems a really good point to stop. A really words of advice there. So I don't know if anyone has any further queries or questions or things they'd like to raise. But if I don't see any other hands, a huge thank you, Lewis, for your time this afternoon, and for sharing with us all your experience over at Tullie House. And thank you everyone for joining us on today's Chewing the Cud